Why they mob you, the scapegoat as threat. Welcome back. I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and this is the Family Roles series. In today's video, we're going to uncover why family mobbing happens, not just what it looks like, but why it occurs in the first place. The title of this video is Why They Mob You, the Scapegoat as Threat. And that's what we're going to teach. If you've been rejected, excluded, or erased by your own family, it wasn't a personal flaw. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a systemic reaction to your refusal to keep playing the role they needed you in. You were mobbed because you destabilized a system that relied on you staying small. Dysfunctional families are not organized around truth. They are organized around emotional regulation. But instead of using communication or self-awareness to manage discomfort, they distribute it. Every member of the family is unconsciously assigned an emotional role that serves the group's survival strategy. These roles are not chosen. They're shaped by stress, trauma, parentification, and generational damage. And in these systems, the scapegoat role is central. The scapegoat is the person who carries the emotional weight of what the family refuses to confront. Your job, without agreeing to it, was to absorb the shame, anxiety, anger, or guilt of others, so they didn't have to deal with it themselves. The problem begins when you stop doing that job. The moment you begin healing, whether by going to therapy, setting boundaries, speaking up about abuse, or even just living authentically, you disrupt the emotional contract that keeps the family in balance. That disruption creates panic, but because the group has no tools to process that panic, they default to a defense strategy. And that strategy is mobbing. They begin to target you not because you've done something wrong, but because your transformation reveals what they haven't addressed. This is about emotional homeostasis. All systems seek to maintain balance. But in dysfunctional families, balance is maintained through suppression, not through honesty. The rules are unspoken, but strictly enforced. Don't talk about the abuse, don't confront the favorite, don't challenge the narrative, don't change. When you break those rules, when you confront a toxic father, question a family religion, say no to being the emotional caretaker, you create instability. Your growth is not interpreted as progress. It's interpreted as threat. Because now, the group has to either change with you or remove you. You may notice that mobbing doesn't begin with aggression. It often begins with subtle signaling. You're told you've changed. You're called too sensitive. You're warned that you're making things harder than they need to be. These comments are not random. They're regulation attempts. They're coded messages that say, get back in your role. If you don't comply, the system escalates. First, one person distances, then another, then jokes are made at your expense. Then you're excluded from group events. Then narratives are crafted behind your back. Not because the family is consciously conspiring, but because the system is defending itself. This is how collective rejection gets framed as concern. We're just worried about you. You've been acting off. You're different lately. These aren't objective observations. They're repositioning tactics. The family is repositioning your healing as instability, so they can justify excluding you. This protects the status quo. It allows them to feel morally superior while still executing the social punishment. They don't call it abuse, they call it boundaries. But the boundary isn't to protect themselves from harm. It's to protect themselves from change. One of the most common triggers for mobbing is when you name something they've all agreed not to talk about. It could be an alcoholic parent, a history of sexual abuse, favoritism, racism, emotional incest. Whatever the taboo is in your family system, when you speak it, you shatter the illusion of normalcy. That illusion is the glue that holds the family together. And by speaking, you force others into cognitive dissonance. They now have to either face the truth you named or label you as the problem. Most will choose the latter. Not because they are evil, but because they are emotionally unequipped to do anything else. This is why the scapegoat is usually the one who seeks help. You go to therapy. You set boundaries. You read the books. You get clarity. And then you return to the family, expecting them to meet you in that clarity. But they don't. Instead, they become more distant, more passive-aggressive, more coordinated in their withdrawal. It's not that you became worse, it's that you became a mirror. And what you reflected back was too painful for them to integrate. So rather than evolve, the group expels you. Not with violence, but with silence, with exclusion, with reputational damage, with narrative control. At the root of all this is a group defense mechanism. This is not about one bad person. It's about the collective need to preserve a shared emotional fiction. In your family, the fiction might have been that everything was fine, that dad was a good man, that mom sacrificed everything, that abuse didn't happen, that you were always the one with issues. When you contradict that fiction, you become a liability. And the system responds like an immune response. It isolates the perceived threat to protect the organism. Even small acts of change can trigger this reaction. You decide not to come to Christmas. You set a boundary around how you're spoken to. You refuse to engage in gossip. You prioritize your mental health. Each of these acts represents a deviation from your assigned role. And every deviation creates friction. Because the system doesn't just expect you to play your part, it depends on it. The emotional lives of others are structured around you taking the blame. When you stop, they don't know what to do with their pain. So they externalize it. They claim you're unstable, that you're isolating yourself, that you've become difficult. These accusations are not about truth. They are about containment. Scapegoats are often labeled as the problem, not because they cause the dysfunction, but because they break the pattern. You refuse to keep absorbing the family's unresolved trauma. And when you do that, the system reinterprets your resistance as instability. They say you're overreacting, that you're mentally unwell, that you're ruining the family. But what you're actually doing is healing. The reason they call it destruction is because they're confusing comfort with health. Dysfunctional systems are comfortable for those who benefit from them. And when you stop cooperating, you become the enemy of that comfort. There's also the issue of hierarchy. Many families have a dominant figure, the narcissist, the covert manipulator, the emotionally immature parent who sets the tone. This person often feels threatened by authenticity because it limits their control. When the scapegoat begins healing, this person loses their grip. So they start the whisper campaign. She's not well. He's being difficult. They're unstable. These comments are not made to you directly. They're made around you. They prime the rest of the group to view you through a distorted lens. And once that lens is in place, every action you take is reinterpreted through it. If you speak up, you're aggressive. If you set a boundary, you're hostile. If you disengage, you're cold. The lens defines you, not your actions. Eventually, the mobbing becomes normalized. People who once had neutral or even positive relationships with you begin to mirror the dominant narrative. This is not always out of malice. It's about group conformity. People fear being the next target. So they go along with the script. They stay silent when you're attacked. They don't invite you. They stay out of it. But their silence is complicity, and their passivity fuels the system. The mobbing doesn't just hurt because of what one person does. It hurts because of what the group allows. What's critical to understand is that the mobbing is not proof that you are broken. It's proof that you changed. The day the group turned on you is the day you stepped out of the role that kept the system functioning. That isn't dysfunction. That's progress. You didn't cause the breakdown. You exposed what was already broken. The pain you feel isn't from your failure. It's from your awakening. You saw the pattern. You refused to play along. And now, the system is reacting the only way it knows how, by trying to erase the threat. So what do you do with this knowledge? You stop trying to make them see you. You stop trying to be understood by people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop asking a system that runs on suppression to validate your truth. And instead, you return to your own mind. You stabilize your own perception. You trust your own experience. You name what's happening, not for them, but for you. Because the moment you name it, you're no longer under the spell of confusion. You're back in your body. You're back in your truth. And that's the real exit, not just from the mobbing, but from the role you were never meant to play. You were never the problem. You were the pattern breaker. And that's why they mobbed you. Hi, I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and what you just watched is part of my signature program, the Chosen One series inside School of Soul. This series is not just a course, it's a blueprint for those who know they were different from the start. The black sheep, the scapegoat, the truth teller, the cycle breaker. Inside, you'll discover the family roles playbook, the golden child, the scapegoat, the enabler, the lost child, and how to finally step out of the part you were cast in without consent. How the black sheep becomes the goat, turning rejection into radical transformation and leadership. How to break generational curses and rewrite ancestral contracts so the pain stops with you. And how to recognize and escape modern forms of spiritual and technological targeting, from gang stalking to synthetic synchronicity. This isn't just about survival. It's about awakening, about reclaiming your voice, your lineage, and your destiny as one of the chosen ones. Click the link below to access the full series now, because the role ends the moment you decide it does, and the real script begins with you.